It is a combination of what we sometimes do in two lessons, because we're talking about the internet, technology, social media, all those kind of things. The title for this, or the subtitle for this, really is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So I don't know how many people remember that movie, but The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So the internet and social media and technology have all three of those facets. And we're only going to talk about two of them because we don't really need to concern ourselves with the good side of that, but we know there is a benefit in technology, especially if you're a generation younger than me or two generations younger than me, like my grandkids, that you couldn't really survive very effectively without having those skills in technology and computer usage and all that. They start that at such an early age of school. So there are good benefits of that, no question. But there is certainly a downside of that as well. I came across this cartoon and I thought, I like that. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may update your Facebook status. It is pretty remarkable how attached we are to our technology. And you can find something like that out when you have something like when we do a marriage retreat. And if you're going to start a class, and all you have to do is set a box in the back of the class, and as people come in the door, say, would you please put your phone in the box until class is over? I mean, you could send people into panic, thinking that they've got to actually put their, not just, I'm going to try my best not to take it out of my pocket, I'll put it on silent, but if it buzzes, we've got that tendency. It's like, if it buzzes, I'm just going to sneak a peek at it. Get them to put the phone down entirely. Would you please turn your phone off, put it in the box? You'll cause some people to panic. We are very attached to it, no question. And I mentioned specifically, I just want to say this, and this is not me drumming up business, I hope you understand. But I've been asked by a few people, because we do marriage retreats, Rob Walker and I, and Paula, his wife, and Judy, my wife. We do some marriage retreats that are off-site, and we're doing probably our very last one this year in October. I was supposed to bring cards that had that information, just in case you wanted that. I failed to bring them, but I will have them tomorrow, and I'll leave them with Lawrence or Randy or somebody, so that if you want that information, you can get that information. We conduct those as an absolutely nonprofit, non-paid arrangement. That's why I'm not drumming up business for ourselves. None of the teachers get paid. None of the staff gets paid. None of that. It is truly a labor of love. We're both interested in marriage ministry. And so we just spend a few days together with couples, up to 50 couples, who want to dedicate their time to being with other couples who are all striving to gain some tools to help them improve their marriage. And we've got some people here who have been to them before. Had one couple sign up last night. I'll let them tell you later that they were the ones that did. We had one couple sign up last night for that. And I know the Harbisons have been before with us as well, and so grateful for that. It gives us a chance to grow in our relationships to one another. So enough of that shameless plugging. But just want people to know that those kind of things are out there and available, because if you want to make your marriage better, let me ask you this way. How many people have ever read books on marriage improvement? Good. Because I can tell you, a lot of times not very many hands go up for that, and there were several here, and that's a good thing. There are good books that have been written. Some of them not as good as others. Some of them are half good. I've read some books where you think, man, that was really good. You read a couple chapters, and then you read further, and you're saying, that was awful. But got good use out of the chapters. There was a book called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti that was a great analogy book, especially dealing with the concept of communication. So, but it had good parts, had bad, parts that weren't helpful to me. Read good marriage books. Go to, not ours necessarily, but I'm saying if you find out Christians are having a gathering where they're going to talk about marriage, put yourself in that group of people that's going to talk about that. Or you guys are large enough here, you may already have one. Starting couples groups and having some kind of meetings where you can discuss those kind of things. Huge benefit to the relationship. So we want to talk about the assaults associated with technology. As you think about first time, very similar to as we talked about children. It is in fact very addictive in its nature. Somebody give me an example of how it can pull you in. I'm not talking about the bad side necessarily. The only bad here is that it pulls you in for longer than it should. I'm not talking about looking at material you shouldn't. That's the ugly. We'll get to that at the end of the lesson. But give me an example of how it pulls you in. Anybody ever been pulled in by it? You think the people that write all the algorithms in those programs like Facebook and YouTube, you think they don't know what they're doing? Have you ever done like I've done? Somebody says, hey, you need to watch this YouTube video. And so you go to watch it and you think, man, that was a good video. But then I'd be okay, except they put these other 8 of them right over here on the side. It's like, you like this one? You might like this one. And I've seen some of those and I thought, hey, I think I'm going to click on that. And so I click on that, you know. And Judy can tell you that. I click on one, and especially I do that with music sometimes. It's like, oh, you know what? Wow, I didn't know they had video on. Click on it. And all of a sudden you find yourself, and I've watched for 15 minutes when I intended to watch for 2. And so all of a sudden it pulls you in. It's addictive that way. It sometimes will cause us to do things that we didn't intend to do when we first opened it up. But that's an off-putting word, is it not? Addiction? Because we normally think of addiction as associated with what? Drugs. Alcohol. And now in our culture, very popular to hear people talk about having a sexual addiction. Excuse me. And so automatically it is a type of word that just kind of puts us off. To talk about technology addiction, information addiction, internet addiction. It doesn't sound as offensive, but it's taking its toll on Christians as well as other people. This is just an example of how much time in the U.S. is spent. Now, I know you can't read all those things necessarily, you don't need to. But you can see 92% of time spent on technology is spent on an app, either Facebook, which has the single largest, still the single largest. There are billions. You realize there are billions of Facebook users? No, not just millions. There are billions of Facebook users. But Snapchat and messaging people and YouTube and the music, how much? Average in the United States of America, 5 hours per day are spent on, that does not include work time where you have to spend on the internet. That does not include school time where they have you on the internet. That is your own personal time being spent. Now, the third largest of those is gaming. The amount of people that spend, especially my generation does. I quit doing computer games. As soon as my kids could beat me at Mario, it's like, it isn't any fun anymore. So I don't play the computer games anymore. But you got kids, you ever see anybody pull into a computer game and just get tied up in that? Fortnite, something of that sort? How easy it is to watch kids, and especially once they were able to communicate with people in other places and they're playing games, it can take a huge portion. 61% of gamers say that they will miss sleep in order to game. In this country, 61%. 39% say they will skip a meal. 21% said they've missed a shower. That one's concerning. 11% have actually skipped work because they were involved in gaming. There's an app called Facebook Nanny that only serves one purpose. It is to keep you from spending too much time on Facebook. The very fact that they had to create an app should tell you how it is pulling us in and how it's taking too much time from us. Who cares? 67% of couples in romantic relationships say they've argued between them, have argued about the amount of time their spouse spends on social media. Think about that. 67% of romantic couples, that includes married and dating, but 67% say they've argued about it. This way, 21% say they argue about it regularly, often. 40% sometimes, another 39% rarely. But that's a lot of people who are arguing over something that is probably not remotely necessary to either one of them. Certainly not beneficial to the couple themselves. As we think about that, it becomes absolutely necessary to find time to consistently detach. And that may require a schedule. I know I mentioned several times that I meet with couples, and I just tell you that because as I deal with couples that struggle with some of these different things, I've got a couple that just recently I said, here's what I need you to agree to do. I need you to agree that you are going to have 1 hour of non-tech time every evening this week. Both of you are shutting off computers, shutting off your phones, iPads, whatever else you have, turning off the TV. There is no screen time. It's interesting that we will, how many people tell your children how much screen time they can have, or monitor how much screen time they can have. Okay, so if you got children and you didn't raise your hand, you should. Obviously, our children spend so much time on screen time that we need to be concerned about that. But we do that to our kids. Are we doing it to ourselves? We might have to schedule time. We may have to decide we're not going to get on tech at all for the next hour. We are going to just be with each other. You might have to actually schedule that for it to happen, because you've got to answer who's in control. Remember, Paul said that there are a lot of things that he could choose to do. But he says, I will not be mastered by anything. Paul was saying, you know what, there's some things I can do. Internet, like I said, has a good side. Even social media can have a good side. We've got kids, and so you occasionally get to see pictures of grandkids and other things. That's good. I understand there's a good side of that. I need to be careful that it doesn't control me, that it doesn't dictate how much time I'm spending on it, and it doesn't dictate what I am doing on it either. So we need to be careful of that. Expectations change. Very important for couples to understand. You are getting such a lopsided view of life when you read social media posts. Would you agree with that? You know, your sheet, I think, even has that one quote on there. May your life be half as good as your Facebook page says it. You ever read posts? I read posts from people I know, and I know their children. And I read posts that they write, and I'm thinking, these aren't the kids that I know. This is not the child. I understand you don't want to post all the things your kids are doing bad on there, but we're painting such a flowery picture that everybody thinks it's perfect. We do that amongst Christians. God talks about confessing your faults one to another. How gifted are we at doing that? Well, I had a member of the congregation when I was in St. Louis, Missouri, who came to me one time. He said, I've been wanting to go forward for about the last 6 weeks. He was struggling mightily with some stuff. He said, but I didn't want to do that because I felt like I'd be the designated sinner. He had never heard another Christian acknowledge any problems before. You know, when you talk about marriages, how many marriages do you think are struggling in a congregation the size that you have here? I can tell you way more than you think are. I don't know how many, but I can tell you way more than you think are. There's not even a question about that. We don't know what's going on under the surface, and so what happens is people are posting things, and this one lady talked about that when she talked about the expectations, because we're making wrong comparisons after we get this information. She read this post. It read specifically, happy anniversary to this beautiful woman. Husband posted this, not her, one of her friends. Happy anniversary to this beautiful woman. So lucky that she is the love of my life. She said that's how the enthusiastic caption read underneath the photo of one of my girlfriends. Her husband posted it to Facebook, and it loomed large in my feed as I scrolled. I paused just long enough to click like under the photo, but I didn't like it. Not really. Instead, I felt a clawing envy, one that wished wistfully that I were the object of someone's public display of affection in this news feed. But then she went on to say, never mind that my own husband doesn't even use Facebook, or that we just celebrated a decade of marriage at Disney World together. She said, I was perfectly content with how we marked that milestone until I saw a handful of posts from another couple with photos of gorgeous bouquets and even more flowery words of affection. Then I felt a bit slighted, as though my marriage were missing something. You realize how easy it is to read something else by somebody, and you get a little bit of that envy. You know what? I wish I had that. I wish that was happening. Understand that the posts that we read when we're on the internet too much is going to cause us to make bad comparisons. It's going to cause us to look at the wrong things. Paul talked about being content. We talked about that last night. He learned to be content. That doesn't happen when we look at what other people have. We start to want, and we start to think in terms of what I don't have instead of in terms of what I do. And so you want to get a better appreciation for your wife? Spend more time with your wife. You want more appreciation for your husband? Spend more time with him, not reading posts about others. These are some headlines out of some stories that I just thought were interesting. Your smartphone may be powering down your relationship. These are just, we're not going to read the article. These are just some headlines. I thought, interesting that this is being written about as much as it is. Are gadget-free bedrooms the secret to a happy relationship? That's another article. Parents, wired to distraction. Or, want to perk up your love life? Put away your smartphone. I'm telling you, people are acknowledging that it is consuming this incredible amount of time and changing our expectations. How many people are on social media? 2.5 billion on social media. And saying what? Who cares? I'm thinking, you ever repost and you're thinking, why did that even pop up? I feel like I've got a Facebook page because of Enlight. I mentioned this may be our last retreat. If it is, I will no longer have a Facebook page. It just drives me crazy. But I've got a Facebook page, and occasionally I see stuff pop up. I've been tempted to spend a better part of a day when I've got some extra free time just posting every little place I go. Checking in at McDonald's. Stopped at the red light on 281 and Bulverde Road. I see posts like that, and I'm thinking, who really wants to know that about your life? We will post anything. We get so involved in that. God talks about where is it that we're placing our trust, as if that's something about our real life. We think in those kind of terms. Fulfillment comes only from God. You'll never find fulfillment on your computer in any form. You'll never even find fulfillment, true fulfillment, through your wife. You'll find it through God. Your wife will be used by God to help that happen. But God is the only one. That's why your wife can't make you happy. Your husband can't make you happy. Only God can make you happy if we serve him. I've got to make sure I'm striving for the right goal from the right source, and it must be from God. When the psalmist wrote, some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. Amen? That's what God wants us to understand. So we need to make sure that we don't do that. 60% of people using social media report that it has impacted their self-esteem in a negative way. Why would you use it if it impacts you in a negative way? I tell people, Kansas City, we lived there for 21 years. Kansas City has world's worst tourist attraction, in my opinion. I understand that's my opinion. Don't know if you know it or not. Kansas City is the home of Hallmark. And there is a Hallmark Visitor Center that you can go. And within the Hallmark Visitor Center is this room that has several doors in it. And you can go behind these doors and close that door, and you can watch Hallmark commercials. And so what you see normally there is a group of men standing out in the middle, and women coming out of the doors weeping. And every man thinks, this is just the difference in the way we process, but every man's thinking, why are you going in if you know it's going to make you cry before you come out? Well, if I know it's going to impact me negatively, there should be something that's throwing up red flags and saying, why are you choosing to do it? If it's impacting you negatively, I don't want to feel that way. And then thirdly, along that line, unchristlike attitudes. And I'll tell you, I didn't have this one in this lesson until last, not this previous election, although you could have done it again. But the election before that, I saw posts by Christians that were more unchristlike than anything I could possibly imagine. I don't know how many people saw that. Getting involved in the diatribe and the angry words and the things that were being said about different people and to different people. And I thought, I don't need that. I don't need that. There is enough negativity surrounding me that I don't need to voluntarily jump into the pool of it. And that happens on social media. You can read things that people ought not be posting. You don't ever see Jesus talking that way to people, even the people he disagreed with, other than those like the Pharisees that he could read their hearts. Do you realize there's nobody's heart I can read? I need to be careful about what I say and careful about what I read because it affects us, does it not? I'll give you an example of that real quickly. Somebody recommended a movie to us. Said, you ought to go see this movie. And I thought, all right, we'll go see the movie. We lasted about 5 minutes in the movie. The language was so bad in the first 5 minutes, it just said, can't do this. So leave during the movie. And somebody says afterwards, hey, did you see that movie? We said, it's all 5 minutes of it. and left because the language was so bad. This is a Christian having this conversation with, to which that person responds, really? I don't remember the language being that bad. Well, how does that happen? Because if you're a Christian and the Lord's name is being taken in vain, that ought to throw up all kinds of red flags. That ought to be disgusting to us, should it not? Just give me a nod, one way or the other. I can read this. I can read this. I can't read this. So, yeah, I mean, that should disgust us. But it somehow, as we absorb more and more of it, we notice it less. I would tell you the same is true with how social media affects us as well. So we need to be very careful about that. And then thirdly, as far as in the bad side of this, connection. We think it's connection. I did this and made this point one time talking about friendships and relationship and that kind of thing. And I asked the group that I was talking to, how many friends do you have? Well, that's the only way I phrased the question. Somebody assumed I was talking about Facebook friends. I had somebody come up to me and say, I've got 2,100 and however many friends it was. And I said, you can't have 2,000 friends. You can't. You can't connect with that many people. I can connect with them on Facebook, don't get me wrong. I can put them in my friends column. I don't know anything about them. I don't spend any time with them. I can't have true connection, and connection is absolutely important. We live in this community of accelerating contradiction. The more connected we become, the lonelier we are as a culture. We need to understand these connections are not real. Social connection is not the same as a bond between two people. That's why God puts us together, so we can bond with one another, so we can truly be brother and sister together, so we can encourage and stimulate one another to those love and good works that the Hebrew writer talks about. God made us for relationships. How do we know that? Because he said he wants us to be one. Talking about a husband and wife especially. Wants us to be one as he and Christ are one. That's a relationship. How well did Jesus know his Father? How much time did Jesus spend with his Father? In prayer all the time. It says he grew. Luke 2 is such an interesting passage. Luke 2 and verse 52, where it talks about Jesus. It said he grew in stature. We understand that. He was born as a baby. He grew in stature. He got bigger. We understand that. He also grew in wisdom. We understand that. As a man, he grew in wisdom, and so he's learning as any other child. He wasn't born with full knowledge of everything. He grew in wisdom. He grew in favor with God. You ever think about that statement? Wait, he was the Son of God, but he grew in favor with God. That's just God. Now, for me, I understand it this way. I loved my children dearly the day they were born. I continued to love them every day, but they grew more and more dear as you watched them start to develop a relationship with God. Can you agree with me on that? It doesn't mean I love them more than I did when they were younger. But I'm saying that favor and that appreciation that just continues to grow. He grew in favor with God and grew in favor with man. We have to have a relationship. We sacrifice intimacy by spending time on things that detract our minds. The psalmist said, but as for me, how good it is to be near God. I've made the sovereign Lord my shelter, and I will tell everyone about the wonderful things you do. See, the psalmist is just saying, I am so glad I have this relationship with my God. And I want to tell people about my God and how great my God is and all the things my God does. He's saying that's the kind of relationship husbands and wives ought to have with one another. I am so near to my wife, I want to tell people what a great wife she is and the things that she does and how she benefits me in this life and how this gift that God has given me has been the greatest blessing on earth that I've ever been able to enjoy. That means so much. He's saying that's the relationship that we're striving for. The intimacy gets sacrificed if we don't do that. We're told also, draw near to God, he'll draw near to you. That's the way relationships work, is it not? I draw near to my wife, she draws near to me. Both of us are putting forth that effort to truly become one flesh with one another. That doesn't happen the day you get married. There's sexual union when you get married, and that's a part of one flesh, but that's not the entirety, I don't think, of what he's talking about, because he says they shall become one flesh. That is a growth process that we become more and more and more a part of one another as we grow, and that's what we should be doing, striving for that kind of relationship. The 2014 Pew Research Center indicated 1 in 4 cell phone owners in a relationship or marriage found that their partner was too distracted by their cell phone. Let me just ask, just give me a nod of the head so not everybody sees you. Don't have to raise your hand on this. How many of you have ever been with your husband or wife out somewhere and the other one was distracted because of the cell phone? Been there? I'll raise my hand. Worst thing that's ever happened in restaurants, in my opinion. Worst thing. Probably all the worst things I understand, but one of the worst things. When they put televisions up in restaurants, what were they thinking? So I go on a date with my wife, and what do you think they're playing behind her head? The football game that I may or may not even be interested in, and yet I still look at it. She's talking, and you ever give it one of those? It's just like, she looks down at her food real quick, you glance up, maybe I can catch a score. It is easy to be distracted even when you're trying to spend time together. In 2015, 453 adults were polled. Nearly half said they reported being distracted by their phones in the presence of a romantic partner. So in other words, it's not saying my partner was distracted. You've got half or more, or right at half, that said I was distracted. And I know that's happened. You want a challenge? Put your phone face down. Next time you're out at a restaurant, put it face down, put it on silent, but leave it on. And see how good you are at not flipping it over when it buzzes on the table. Don't worry, I don't care who it is. It doesn't matter. I'm leaving it until we're done with our dinner together. We'll check that later. It is hard not to just get that phone, give it a little touch. Let me just see if I can figure it out. It's a distraction to us, and we know that. One man wrote this, and I'll like the quote. He says, if you're sleepwalking into silliness that postures as meaningful life, repent and ask God to wake you up. I think that's a good quote. He's saying, you know what? We get involved in some of the things, and we realize they're not helpful the way we think they are, but it changes us. Love this picture. Love that picture. That's not a posed picture. I talked to a good friend of mine who said they were taking their son and his date somewhere one time when they were just starting dating, the son wasn't driving. He said, and they noticed how peculiarly quiet the back seat was, which concerned him. He said, but then they looked up. The two kids are in the back seat texting each other. They're sitting a foot apart from each other, and they're texting each other back and forth. You realize how common that is? That we text people that are right there because we've broken that true connection that God wants us to have. I would tell you, you want to absolutely sync up with your wife or your husband, then power down. You have to kill technology at some point, not completely, but at some point, to be able to have the relationship God wants you to have. That's the bad side of social media and the internet. It consumes our time, it changes our expectations, and it breaks our connection. And God wants us to have correct roles in all of those. But let me take just a few minutes to talk about the ugly side. The ugly side. When you read about in Matthew 7, it talks about that storm coming, and the winds and the waves and all that are crashing. And it says, and they slammed against the house. I would tell you there's some aspects of life that slam marriage, sometimes doing damage that is almost, if not completely, irreparable. It is hard to get past some of the damage that may come into a relationship. And so we need to understand, how do I avoid that kind of thing from happening? I would tell you, first, perceive the danger. How'd you like to drive that road? I think it's in Bolivia, if I'm not mistaken. There are more deaths on that road, I think, than any other road in the world, yearly. Why? Cars actually try to pass each other on that road, coming opposite ways. But they try to work away, and more cars fall off of that thing yearly than anywhere else. You have to understand, I've got to understand, if you had to drive that road, how careful would you be? You ever think about that? I'm thinking, I'd be pretty cautious. If I had to drive it, I'd be pretty cautious, and I'd be looking at every inch of the road. It's important to perceive the danger that's in front of us, because no marriage is immune from temptation. And the internet is one of the gigantic sources of that happening. Vulnerability increases that danger. Love this quote from Dave Carter. He wrote a book called Torn Asunder, and it's about marriages that divided. He wrote another one called Close Calls, which is another good book. It is interviews with couples who almost got involved in an adulterous relationship, but was able to break it off before they did. And so it's called Close Calls. But in this one, Torn Asunder, he said, when we are vulnerable, we are emotionally run down, our defenses are down, our perspective on things is clouded. We're not able to make judgment based on truth, and everything is seen through an emotional filter. Pain is intensified. Therefore, the pursuit of relief from pain is also intensified. When you're vulnerable, a situation that might otherwise be safe may now be unsafe. What makes us vulnerable? Give me an example of anything that would make us vulnerable to temptation.
Being gone a lot, being on the road.
Oh, no question. Great point. Being gone a lot, being on the road, traveling, being away from our spouse. Just incredible. And you think about some families that not only are on the road a lot, sometimes for long times they have to be separated. Incredible vulnerability because of that. Other things.
Stress.
What's that?
Stress.
Absolutely. Under a lot of stress. Maybe I'm under stress at work. Maybe there's stress because of the kids. Maybe whatever the case may be. Maybe I've got a sick family member and I'm stressed because of that. Any kind of stress makes us more vulnerable. Any other things you can think of?
Insecurities.
What's that?
Insecurities.
Absolutely. Insecurity. We feel insecure. We're looking now for affirmation. We're not getting the affirmation that we think we should get. You know, going through burnout in life, I am just worn down, makes us more vulnerable. Feeling rejected and therefore looking for validation from somebody else. Experiencing boredom. Sometimes people just get bored and then therefore you're more vulnerable to things. It's very easy. We look for some fun or an excitement. We're more vulnerable because maybe we don't even realize our personal weaknesses. We don't acknowledge what our weakness is. And so we become vulnerable because of that. All of a sudden, that boundary issues fall aside that shouldn't fall aside. Having unfulfilled expectations, unexpressed needs. Corinthians, Paul talked about just being overconfident. You think you're okay? Paul says you better watch out. You think everything's good, everything's safe, you better watch out. Because that's what happens right before you fall. He says you need to always be aware. And so we're going to see that we need to make sure that as we think about the internet, because it is a huge source of stimulating the desires that create the extramarital relationships. It's not the source for most, although it is the source for some. I've got a good friend who reconnected with a girl that he knew in high school, and they were boyfriend and girlfriend at that time, and it wasn't long before they started getting closer and closer. They had an adulterous relationship. His marriage is severed. Life is wrecked for multiple children. It started because he just saw it. I can tell you for Judy and I, no friends. I don't have any Facebook friends if they're not her friend also. And I don't have any friend that is a single female, or a female that she doesn't know. It's like, what business have I got having a friendship, even on Facebook, with somebody that my wife doesn't know that's female? There's no benefit for me in that. And there's certainly none for her. I can secure her feelings better if I put those things in protection. And so Peggy Vaughn says, preventing affairs is not like having a one-time inoculation or even getting occasional booster shots. It's more like taking a pill every day for the rest of your life. Paul said that, didn't he? Not about affairs. Paul said what? I buffet my body daily. Paul didn't say, you know what, every Monday I buffet my body and then I'm good for the rest of the week. Paul said, every day I have to dedicate myself to God. Every single day. I would tell you, that's what we need to do in our marital relationships. It is an everyday commitment mentally that we make sure that we do that. So what are the things that healthy marriages have in common? Boundaries. Boundaries. Love this phrase. Preparation is less painful than reparation. That is absolutely true. Put things in place to protect yourself That is way better than having to repair damage. Tomorrow, if the Lord allows, our lesson is called repairing storm damage. Still dealing with Matthew 7, but it's repairing storm damage. What happens when there is some transgression, not necessarily extramarital relationship, but when there's transgression, there's broken relationship at some level. So I would tell you, you need to plant hedges. Plant hedges in life. And we're going to give you a couple of them in a minute. It's very important to think about that. These are advanced decisions we make to protect our marriage. We plant physical hedges in our life. I don't mean the actual landscaping. But I'm saying we do things like locking doors in our houses, don't we? We didn't always used to do that, but that's more of a danger now, so what do? You lock doors. Or people put up fences, or whatever else the case may be. We understand the nature of putting some barrier of protection around us. In Proverbs chapter 5, the author says, keep knowledge, keep to a path. Don't go near. He's saying you need to be focused on this, where your heart is, where your mind is, where your steps are, everything. And then he says, how I hated discipline. But that's what it takes. We need to be the kind of people who are willing to discipline ourselves. Why? Because the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak. That's true, isn't it? That was Jesus' statement, not mine. That's what he told his own disciples. I was teaching this lesson or a similar lesson one time in Colorado, and I had a guy come up to me afterwards. He says, I won't ever do that. Won't ever. I said, that is a great decision to make. I said, what are you doing to make sure it doesn't happen? He goes, I don't have to do anything. I've decided I wouldn't ever cheat on my wife. I would never get involved in that kind of immorality. I said, that's great. What are you doing to make sure that doesn't happen? And he says, you're overboard with that. He goes, you don't have to be doing anything. And another guy I hadn't even met yet. I'm doing a meeting. Another guy walked up and joined our conversation. I don't even know who the guy is. And he looks at both of us, he looks at the other guy, and he goes, I would have fallen asleep with the other disciples. And I thought, what in the world is he talking about? Did he hear any of our discussion? And so I'm thinking, what? And the other guy goes, what? He says, I would like to think that I could have stayed awake because Jesus said stay awake. He said, but I wouldn't have. I'm confident. I would have fallen asleep with the other disciples. Why? Because the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Paul cautions us about that. Jesus cautions us about that. Plant those hedges. Here's some hedges you can have. One, no secrets, especially when it comes to computer and internet and all those kind of things. No accounts that you have that your spouse doesn't have access to. I love the fact that, and I love it for multiple reasons, because I get more texts and emails than I want to get. Just telling. I'm not telling you that so you don't send me anything. I just automatically get more than I want to get. So Judy and I, the rule at our house is anybody can pick up anybody else's phone because we've got each other's passwords and we can open the phone and nothing's locked that we can't access. And so if somebody texts me and I'm sitting where my phone is not, she can pick it up and look at it. I'm fine with that. No secrets. No access that I have that she doesn't have. Matter of fact, I'd prefer if she read all my texts personally and respond to them. That would be a big help. It doesn't work that way, but you can't have the secrets. No passwords, no social media that the spouse doesn't know about. I need to make sure that I don't have any of those things in my life. I need to open up everything. And I've got multiple. How many people have multiple email accounts? I've got one for people I like and friends. And I don't mean the other one's for people I don't like. The other one is for stuff I have to do online occasionally, and you have to put an email address. They get my junk email address that I don't have to check but once a month. Everybody else gets my real email. Anybody else do that? I don't want to sound too deceptive, but I don't want to give everybody access to my regular email. So people I don't know, I'm saying businesses and companies and that kind of thing. But it doesn't matter. She's got access to all of it. Whatever the case is, making sure that there are no secrets. Secondly, increase your investment at home. Shut down the computer and talk to each other. Communicate your needs with each other. When I have couples, I had a couple that I was talking to, and the response from the guy was, my wife won't ever To which her response was, how do you know you'd never asked me? I thought that's interesting, because he's assuming certain things, and she's saying we never even talked about that at all. It is important. If I have needs that I think are unmet, or unmet to what I think they should be, I need to at least share that with my spouse. We need to talk about that, whether it's physical or emotional. We need to share what it is. If I'm the kind of person that just doesn't want to talk at all, and my wife needs that conversation, she needs to say, we need to talk. No, we don't communicate the same way. I understand that. She says we need to talk. I hear, Houston, we have a problem. So you go into that fix-it mode. But the idea is increase that investment. Communicate your needs. Share with one another what you're looking for, because your spouse can provide to you in a godly fashion the things that you are looking for in life. And then I tell people, you want to increase your investment at home? Get naked. Now, what do you mean? You can mean that physically too, whichever way you want to look at that. But I'm saying, get naked. God says it this way: drink water from your own cistern. He says, enjoy the spouse that you have. So much so that he tells men what? He says, let her breast satisfy you at all times. That is a very sexual statement. Go back and read Song of Solomon, and you can see God is not opposed to romantic language and things being talked about of a physical nature. I'm getting ready to teach a class on Song of Solomon, I think third quarter of this year. We're going to card all the people that come in. You have to prove your age before you come in here. But the language is very direct and picturesque. That's okay. Rejoice in the relationship that God has given you, physically and emotionally. That's important. Two's company, three's security. Two's company, just keep that in mind. That's not specifically computer driven, but I would tell you, stay open not only about the computer, but stay open about everything. You don't need to be alone in some kind of setting, even of what appears to be benign, with somebody of the opposite sex. Just the two of you. You need to avoid that. If at all possible, you need to avoid that. There's no benefit in that. Stay very public in those things. Understand what matters most. Understand what matters most. If you have to be together, you got a business luncheon and you're going to have to be with somebody, even though you're out in a public place, tell your spouse, make sure they know, hey, I'm going to be at such and such restaurant. You want to really make her feel good or him feel good? Say, hey, you can't join us at the lunch. It's a business lunch. But we're going to be at such and such restaurant. You know what I'd love? I'd love to see you sitting about 2 tables away, so I could just enjoy your presence there while I'm having this meeting. You're trying to help your spouse feel secure in this relationship. Understand, my relationship with her matters more than any business transaction I could ever be involved in. And it's important I recognize that. I cannot sacrifice what matters most for something that matters even a lot. I need to make sure I'm doing the right thing. And then I'm going to tell you, install a strong internet filter. That is so critical. That is so critical. If you got kids and you don't have a strong internet filter on your computer, I'm telling you, you are begging for trouble for them. Your kids will see things and become involved in things, not because they want to be involved, but because of things that pop up. You realize the pornographic websites, and there are literally millions of them, the addresses they have, they buy up every address they can possibly buy that they think will cause people to go to them. Not porn-sounding addresses. We had a good friend that was looking for something that was government-related and went to, I think it was like, I better not tell you what it was. I don't want anybody searching to see if I'm telling the truth. They went to what they thought was the government website, but it wasn't .gov. It was a .com website. And they typed it in that way, and the first thing that popped up was blatantly pornographic material. They were shocked beyond belief. They thought they were going to a government website. How's that happen? Because those sites are buying up all of those things that sound like somebody else's website so they can redirect you to theirs. They literally buy millions of websites, and so you need to be careful of that. Put a filter in. It will take care of that. Understanding when you're doing that. According to a study published in the Journal of Adolescent Research, 49% of young adult women agree that viewing pornography is an acceptable way of expressing one's sexuality. Does that concern you? See, we thought this was a male-only problem. I would tell you, within most churches, and I'm talking about our brethren, within most churches, there are nearly or slightly over 50% of males that are over the age of 18 who are struggling at some level with pornography. I'm telling you, that's hard to imagine. We just had a meeting in our congregation where I asked all the men to come, where we're talking about every man's battle. There's a book called that. Every man's battle. We wanted everybody there to support one another. And the amount of men who, when they were at least in that environment, would say, you know what, I struggle with that too, I need help. It would shock you. We think that there's one or two people. Trust me, it's not that way. It's not that way. The percentages are way higher. The fact that 49% of young women think that it's an okay way. Cyber Psychology and Behavior said 62% of women have seen pornography by the age of 18, 52% by age 14. Not just glimpses. Teen girls are now viewing online pornography a half an hour or more at a time. 1 in 7 say they do that on a regular basis. So it's an industry that has plagued males for a long time, but is now having a gigantic impact on our females as well. Put a filter on your computer at home. Do everything you can to protect your child from being pulled into that. 1 in 5 say they use it for sexual purposes habitually, at least every week is habitual. I'm telling you, those numbers, I don't know about you, they scare me to death. Those are not good numbers. And that's the women. Men's numbers are all higher than that. Put that in there. There's some that have an accountability feature. Covenant Eyes, anybody ever heard of Covenant Eyes? That's an internet filter that has an accountability feature as well as a filter. And so in other words, Covenant Eyes and Victory are together. One's for the phone more than it is for the computer, the other for the computer. But they're joined together and they have a lot of programs to help people. So if you know somebody that's bothered with that, struggling with that, get them involved with Covenant Eyes. And it has an accountability feature where you can set up what they call an ally. And if you even try to go to a website, it sends a note to your ally. It says, here's the website they tried to go to, whether it's your child or your friend. That group we had that met together, virtually everybody in the group decided to buy the book and read the book, so they're reading the book. Multiple of them decided to get on Covenant Eyes and have an accountability partner, and so now they're in a position where if they try to go back to what they were struggling with, somebody else in the group can say, hey, I understand you're struggling, I saw you tried to go, it won't let you go, but it will send a message to your accountability partner and let you know that. Get professional help if needed. It is a deep enough problem that we need to be concerned about it that way. And then I would tell you, some compliments just don't pay. Just be careful what you say. I always think in terms of touchy-touchy. We're a hugging culture. And I'm saying amongst brethren, we're a hugging culture. I don't know if that ever concerns you or not. It doesn't concern me greatly. We're a hugging congregation. We have a new member that just doesn't like that physical contact, and they were shocked out of their mind because everybody wants to hug them all the time. Friendly, not in any bad way, but you got to be careful with that because there's not where I am now, but there was a young lady that was one of those type of people. Never were her motives bad, do I think, don't get me wrong. Never do I think she was intending anything. But she's the kind of person when she'd come up and talk to you, even a male, she might put her hand on your shoulder and do that little shoulder massage, just a little squeeze on the shoulder while they talk. I responded to her. I said, look, I don't think you're intending anything, but I can assure you, I'm not comfortable with that. And if Judy sees that, I guarantee you she won't be comfortable with that. We sometimes aren't cautious as we should be about that. Be careful. Okay to hug, just be careful. Under-over shakers. You ever be an over-under shaker? You reach out and you shake their hand like this, then they turn this palm over and they put their other hand on top of you. They talk to you this way. That's a very intimate gesture. And you think that may not be? Got a good friend that's the way he used to shake hands. A lady was very vulnerable that he was shaking hands with that way repeatedly, another Christian. They ended up getting involved sexually, wrecking the marriages. It's just, it doesn't seem like it's anything but innocent, but we need to be careful. And then finally, pick the fruit. In other words, God has said, hey, look at this fruit tree I gave you. Look what I gave you. Pick that fruit. Benefits are gained. Wonderful things happen. When you start to plant hedges, there's security for everybody that's involved. And when I do things that my wife knows I'm doing to protect her, when I've got covenant eyes on my computer, or I've got filters on my computer and I'm doing things and she's got all my passwords, that kind of thing, everybody feels better. Everybody is more secure. There's less conflict because there's less doubt associated with it. Do whatever you can to make the confidence level as high, and then there's automatically more intimacy. Why? It's like you get your own fenced-in playground. And it's like, look, we've got our own fenced-in playground. We can just play all we want to play, just the two of us. God says that's what's intended. That's what marriage is intended to be. He made us the sexual creatures that we are. He made us that way. He made us male and female with the intent that we be attracted to one another physically as well as emotionally. But he said there's a wholesome and good place to fulfill that. Put all the boundaries up that you have to make sure it gets fulfilled in the right place. We need to make sure that we are putting hedges in place and understanding the greatest, probably, the greatest violator of that is the internet. There's no question about that. It is swallowing up even our brethren with great regularity. And we're finding some marriages almost irreparable because of how involved it has a tendency to make somebody be. Anybody have any questions at all about either this lesson or the previous lesson today? Oh, I saw a hand. No questions? I appreciate that. And I promise Judy will bring those cards tomorrow. I'd say I'd bring them, but I've already forgotten 2 days in a row. So we're going to shift the responsibility. Better chance of them coming. I will bring those cards in case anybody is interested in that at all, or you get information from me about the website. But I'm so grateful that we've been able to come together today. I hope you feel that there's been a benefit in doing this, and if the Lord allows, we'll meet tomorrow and talk about the repairing storm damage. What do we do when there has been a transgression? And unless you guys have anything you need to say, if not, I'll just leave prayer to conclude. Let's pray.